sounds completely different now. See, you know what? The Divine Jules told me to break that. See, this is like a requisite. And I agree, you don't want to crack on the bone. I know about not to crack on the movies. And pedal lad, I do. See, the piano sounds completely different now.
Nobody wanted to make this film. I mean, that was just a fact. If I walked into a room, a film industry gathering, I almost felt I could feel people saying, "Oh God, here he comes with that crazy piano story again," you know. Although people thought, "Oh, it's a wonderful script," it was like, well, who can possibly play that role? So my next challenge was to answer that question. And the answer to that question was Geoffrey Rush, which I thought was going to solve all our problems, but it just made a new problem, which was Geoffrey who? Who is this guy? You mean he's never made a film? I mean, how could you explain to anyone what Geoffrey's capacity was as an actor? I knew because I'd seen him many times on stage. To me, he was perfect. And so, you know, there were all sorts of attempts to get rid of Geoffrey because there were people who wanted to make the film as long as I didn't use Geoffrey. Maybe as a kind of self-preservation, I didn't, you know, want to do that because you know, when you're a director and when you say action to an actor, you want to really hope they can do what you've asked them to do. And I knew Geoffrey could do that. So I didn't want just some movie star coming in and pretending to be this character. And as Geoffrey says in one of his many acceptance speeches for, you know, all those wonderful awards that he won.
And finally, to all those people who were happy to bankroll the film as long as I wasn't in it,
it was a long and arduous process. I brought Jane Scott on to the film, and as the producer, she worked tirelessly to pull interest into the film. There had been development money, which is, you know, always fairly modest in scale, as it should be, from a number of different sources in the years that I had been developing the screenplay. And we really went from one entity to another in search of funds, because each entity would get a bit bored with the idea and thought, you know, oh, well, it hasn't happened, so it's never going to happen. So you'd have to go somewhere else and say, what about this? And people would get enthusiastic for a minute, and then you move on. You know, it's like nobody had the stamina, and we had to provide that. It's a kaleidoscope of financial interests that has to come together to finance a film like this, obviously. And in those days, it was the Film Finance Corporation, which was the predecessor, obviously, of Screen Australia. And yeah, so it was piecing it together. You know, it's really hard for me to say. I've been making films in a different way since then, for the most part anyway. I think making any independent film is a fragile coalition of financial interests. It seems to me that, you know, the two hardest pieces of money to get are always the first and the last. You know, it's that first 10% that kicks you off, but it's filling the last 10% is almost just as hard. The most important ingredient, in my experience, is sheer persistence. You know, you hope you have a little piece of talent, something in there that's worth, you know, working. Otherwise, it's going to be a pretty painful process, you know. But it's, honestly, I'd rather have 10% talent and 90% persistence than the other way around. What's been the touchstone for me is the idea of just not giving up. And if the idea is strong enough, then that's what should fuel you, not what other people's reaction to it is. Because if I'd gone by other people's reaction, I would have abandoned it, like, you know, 18 months later. You know, it's a rare experience. You make a film and people suddenly feel that it has meaning in their lives. So, you know, yes, it works as an entertainment. It's a, you know, an engaging piece of filmmaking. But there was something about Shine that just touched people to their core, and it changed lives, you know, changed my life. Kerry, my wife, who developed it with me all those years. Jan Sardi, you know, became a major screenwriter. Jeffrey Rush became a movie star. You know, I mean, and David Helf got his career back. I mean, it's very, very rare, I think, that you make a film that not only the audience says it touched them and changed their lives, but for the people in it, whose lives get transformed. So, you know, that 10 years of seemingly desperate and hopeless kind of struggle was worth every minute.